Welcome to the Refusion Podcast, where we transform patient care.
Welcome back to another episode of the Refusion Podcast. This is Jennifer, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, John. Today, we're diving into why online reviews are no longer optional in healthcare and how, in 2026, they directly influence which practices grow, which ones struggle, and how patients form opinions long before they ever make that first call or book an appointment.
Exactly, and that's why this conversation matters right now. Today, we're breaking down how reviews influence patient decisions, how behavior is changing across demographics, and how healthcare organizations can use online reputation as a true growth strategy instead of just damage control.
Healthcare is expanding rapidly and competition is intensifying. The U.S. hospital services market alone is projected to exceed $2 trillion by 2030, which means more providers, more outpatient options, and significantly more patient choice than we've ever seen before.
And alongside that growth, outpatient and ambulatory care is accelerating fast. Patients are no longer limited to referrals or proximity. They're actively comparing providers online, weighing experiences, and deciding who feels trustworthy before committing their time or money.
Patients today rarely book blindly. Nearly 3 out of 4 patients consider online reviews a major factor when choosing a healthcare provider, which means reputation has officially become part of the care journey, not something separate from clinical quality.
What's changed is how deeply patients evaluate information. They're not just scanning star ratings anymore. They're reading experiences, emotional cues, and responses from providers to understand how a practice actually treats people day to day.
Healthcare is expanding rapidly and competition is intensifying. The U.S. hospital services market alone is projected to exceed $2 trillion by 2030, which means more providers, more outpatient options, and significantly more patient choice than we've ever seen before.
And alongside that growth, outpatient and ambulatory care is accelerating fast. Patients are no longer limited to referrals or proximity. They're actively comparing providers online, weighing experiences, and deciding who feels trustworthy before committing their time or money.
Patients today rarely book blindly. Nearly 3 out of 4 patients consider online reviews a major factor when choosing a healthcare provider, which means reputation has officially become part of the care journey, not something separate from clinical quality.
What's changed is how deeply patients evaluate information. They're not just scanning star ratings anymore. They're reading experiences, emotional cues, and responses from providers to understand how a practice actually treats people day to day.
Review recency matters more than volume alone. Patients trust feedback from the last 6 months because it reflects how a practice operates right now, not how it functioned years ago under different staff, systems, or leadership.
They also value detail. A thoughtful review describing communication, empathy, wait times, and follow-up often carries more influence than a generic 5-star rating that doesn't explain what made the experience positive or reassuring.
When practices don't actively manage their online presence, patients notice quickly. If reviews are outdated, unanswered, or consistently negative without context, patients assume disengagement and often choose competitors who appear more attentive and responsive.
Silence is rarely neutral. In healthcare, silence is often interpreted as indifference or disorganization. Even excellent providers lose opportunities simply because their online presence doesn't reflect the level of care they deliver in person.
Your online reputation is often the very first impression patients form. Before calling or booking, they evaluate reviews, ratings, photos, and provider responses to decide whether your practice feels credible, respectful, and aligned with their expectations.
That perception forms instantly and emotionally. Patients compare providers side by side, and even small differences in ratings, tone, or responsiveness can determine who earns trust and who never gets contacted at all.
Online reviews now rival traditional word-of-mouth referrals. More than 40% of consumers trust online reviews as much as personal recommendations, which shows how deeply digital trust has become embedded in healthcare decision-making.
And ratings thresholds matter. Most patients won't even consider a provider below 4 stars, which means maintaining strong averages isn't optional anymore. It's foundational for visibility, credibility, and patient acquisition in competitive markets.
The first step is knowing exactly where you stand today. Many practices assume they're doing fine, but without a clear, data-driven snapshot of reviews, ratings, and sentiment, critical blind spots often go unnoticed.
That's where tools like RepuTally help. They provide a clear report card style overview of reputation performance across platforms, showing where you're strong, where you're vulnerable, and where immediate attention is needed.
Once you understand your baseline, the next step is creating a consistent system for generating reviews. Waiting for patients to leave feedback on their own simply doesn't work in today's competitive healthcare environment.
Timing is critical here. Asking patients shortly after a positive experience dramatically increases response rates, especially when the process is automated, simple, and respectful of the patient's time and attention.
Your staff plays a massive role in shaping patient experiences. Front desk interactions, tone of communication, follow-ups, and even small moments of empathy often determine whether patients leave positive reviews or walk away frustrated.
Training teams to understand their role in reputation building transforms everyday interactions into long-term trust signals that continue working for your practice long after the appointment ends.
Responding to reviews is no longer optional. Patients are more likely to choose practices that acknowledge feedback because responses show empathy, accountability, and transparency, especially when concerns are handled calmly and professionally.
Data supports this clearly. Nearly 60% of consumers say they're more likely to choose a business that responds to reviews because engagement signals that patient voices are actually heard and valued.
Negative reviews should always be acknowledged respectfully. Thank the patient, validate their feelings without admitting liability, and offer a path to continue the conversation privately so concerns can be addressed constructively.
Maintaining professionalism matters because your response isn't just for one patient. It's for every future patient who reads that interaction and forms an opinion about your practice's character.
Privacy must always guide review responses. Even if a patient shares personal details publicly, practices should never confirm specifics or reference treatments, diagnoses, or visits in any public response.
Using neutral language and inviting offline communication protects confidentiality while still demonstrating care, responsiveness, and a genuine willingness to improve the patient experience.
Online reputation in 2026 directly shapes patient trust, visibility, and growth. Practices that actively manage reviews, respond consistently, and listen to feedback position themselves for long-term success.
When reputation management is treated as part of patient care, not marketing alone, it becomes one of the strongest competitive advantages a healthcare organization can build.
Thanks for listening to the Repugen Podcast, your path to better healthcare.